Hi, good evening, everyone. We're giving just a moment to get everyone into the room, but good evening and thank you so much for joining us. Let us go ahead and get started. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Senate District 13 virtual legislative preview. I want to thank you in advance for taking time out of your Saturday evening to get a head start on what is going to be occurring in both your General Assembly at the state level, but then also hear several updates about what you can expect from your upcoming Congress as we start the year in 2025. I am so excited to have you and welcome you to this conversation tonight as I am ending the first year of my term in the Senate and to reflect back on some of the progress we've made, but also the work that we are going to be doing as we move forward in year two, but then also the short session of the upcoming General Assembly. Just as a reminder, if you're joining, I hope that you are perhaps one of the individuals that I represent in Senate District 13. As I often say to people, 8 localities to include the city of Petersburg, the city of Hopewell, parts of Dinwiddie County, all of Prince George County, Sussex, Surrey, Charles City, all of Eastern Henrico. If you're at any of those, I represent you and I'm thrilled to have you. But if not, I'm also proud to welcome you tonight as well. Senate District 13 is both diverse geographically, but also in its needs from a rural, suburban, and urban perspective, but then also on the policies that you care about. And so tonight, not only are we going to give you a glimpse of key priority areas, but we are particularly looking forward to drilling down on two of the top issues that are most frequently referenced, and that is housing policy, but then also how to provide additional support for our families, and in this case, a child tax credit. I want you to know that we welcome your questions throughout this conversation. Please feel free to drop them into the chat at any time. And if for some reason we don't get to your question tonight, we commit to definitely getting you an answer at a later time as necessary. So I want to jump right into our conversation. So again, welcome. But we have several special guests joining us to talk about these issues of importance. I'm going to turn it over to our key policy experts here in a second and provide them with introductions. But before I do, I am so thrilled that we have our very own Congresswoman also joining us tonight, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. And by the way, were it not for some of the amazing work that she has done in our General Assembly, I would not be fortunate enough to be here in this role and to continue to build on the work that she has done. So just by way of a brief introduction, which I am almost confident that you probably all know her very well, but Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan entered the United States Congress in 2023, succeeding the late Congressman, Donald McKeechin, as the first Black woman Congresswoman from Virginia, which it always warms my heart to say that because she is truly a trailblazer, both on the policy front, but on this front as well. Prior to entering Congress, she served in the Virginia House of Delegates between from 2005 to 2017, and in the Virginia Senate from 2017 to 2023. A lifelong Virginia resident born in Petersburg, Congresswoman McClellan graduated from the University of Richmond as an undergraduate and from the University of Virginia School of Law. As a member of the Virginia legislature, Congresswoman McClellan has championed some of the most significant initiatives in this century, and that is not an exaggeration, including hallmark legislation to combat climate change, preserving reproductive health care, and enhancing worker protections and labor. And I really wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to hear from Congresswoman McClellan tonight because so many of you have been asking me, what can we expect from the next Congress? Some of you have been concerned as a result of the election that occurred in November about what that means for you, about what that means for your family, and more importantly, what that means for our communities. And so, again, it is just so special to have Congresswoman McClellan take the time to come and talk with us tonight. And I'm thrilled to now turn it over to her to offer us some of her comments. Congresswoman
Well,
McClellan, welcome.
thank you, Senator Aird. It is always a pleasure to be with you. I do miss you and serving with you. While I'm very happy to be in Congress, I do miss my friends in the General Assembly. And we have not quite finished the 118th Congress, so I'll kind of start there. We are scheduled to adjourn on the 19th or the 20th. As you know, we have not passed our appropriations bills at the federal level. We have 12 different appropriation bills covering all of the various aspects of the federal government. And we operate on a fiscal year from October 1st to September 30th. Unfortunately, we have not been able to pass our fiscal year 2025 appropriations bills. We are in fiscal year 2025. We passed what's called a continuing resolution that funded the government through midnight, well, I guess technically 11:59 on December the 20th. And so when I go back to the Hill on Monday, we will have 4 days to do that and to avoid a government shutdown. I think we will, but we don't have language for a new continuing resolution yet. And so hopefully within the next 24 hours, we will see that, because we do have a rule that we have to have 72 hours to review any funding bill. And let me take you back and remind you about a couple of things. You may remember in April of 2023, when we passed a bill to avoid defaulting on our national debt by extending the debt ceiling. That included an agreement on top level spending numbers. And so based on a deal made between then Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the Senate, and President Biden, we should have our top line spending numbers for the next couple of years. And yet House Republicans keep trying to go back on that deal. That's the bad news. The good news is right now, even with a 4-seat majority, they fight more with each other than they do with Democrats. And we sort of sit back and say, look, we're ready to work with you and pass bipartisan funding bills. And they come right up to the deadline, and then they realize, hey, we got to work with the Democrats to get anything done. And so I expect that's what's going to happen. Now, a couple of other bills that were supposed to be extended as well. When Congress passes a bill, they pass it for basically, a set period of time, and then it has to be reauthorized. The Farm Bill, which was last passed in 2018, was supposed to expire last year in 2023. It's a 5-year bill. But we were not able to come to an agreement, and so we extended that 2018 Farm Bill to this year. We have not seen a Farm Bill on the House floor, and there's a fight going on over, House Republicans really want to cut some of the nutrition programs, SNAP programs, school lunches. All of that comes through the Farm Bill, and that's really what the hangup has been. While we try to both, and I know in both in Senator Aird's district and in the 4th district, which goes from Charles City and Richmond down to the North Carolina border, agriculture is critically important. So we want a strong farm bill that is going to give our farmers the resources they need to do their job and feed us. But we also want to make sure we have a farm bill that handles food insecurity. And we have a lot of food insecurity, a lot of food deserts here in Central Virginia. What's likely to happen is the continuing resolution that we hopefully pass next week will just extend the Farm Bill for 1 more year. And then we will work on that next year. So more to come on the Farm Bill. That includes, as I said, SNAP benefits. We have seen across the country, but particularly here in Central Virginia, a tremendous increase in SNAP benefit theft. In the city of Richmond alone, in November, it was a 2,000% increase in SNAP benefit theft, where someone goes to the grocery store, uses their EBT card, and they find out their benefits are gone. Somebody in New York somehow got them. We passed a bill that expires in that continuing resolution next week, giving states and local governments the authority to use federal money to replace those benefits. That expires at midnight on the 20th. I am hoping that we extend that, and I am co-sponsoring a bill that would permanently extend that as well. So that's the Farm Bill, that's the nutrition stuff. That's sort of the last thing we have to do with this Congress. We passed the National Defense Authorization Act last week, which includes raises for our service members, 40% for rank and file members who have not had a raise in a very long time. We dealt with significantly quality of life issues like housing, childcare, access to healthcare, access to mental health services for our service members and military families, which are very important in this district and in Virginia in general. So I'm proud of that bill. We were able to fight the majority of MAGA sort of culture war wish list. There was one piece that we were not able to keep out of the NDAA, which I'm very upset about, and hopefully we will be able to fix. Republicans put in there, just to have a campaign issue, a ban on health insurance coverage for gender affirming care for minors that could lead to sterilization. I'm hoping we are able to get rid of that provision in the next NDAA, but President Trump made clear he was going to do that anyway, and we were able to stop. They had bans on access to travel for abortion services. They had bans, additional bans on gender affirming care for service members, for adults, that we were able to stop all of that. But they did get that one piece in. So that's the 118th Congress. On January 3rd, because we don't no rest for the weary, we will start the 119th Congress. Hopefully, I will have a new committee. I am currently on the Armed Services Committee and the Science Committee. I am hoping to get on Energy and Commerce. Basically, if it moves, it's energy. If it doesn't, it's commerce. So they have a very wide jurisdiction, everything from healthcare, energy policy, environmental policy. So a lot of my priorities will shift to focus on those issues, particularly around maternal health. I know that's been a big issue for both Senator Aird and I. Closing health disparities, addressing the abysmal maternal and infant mortality rates. Those will continue to be big priorities. Stopping Republican efforts to roll back progress on climate action and environmental protections will all come under that committee. And then I'll continue to focus on improving the quality of life for our service members, veterans, and military families. And then keeping my eye on the Farm Bill. So that's a lot. And I know you're going to hear from a lot of people. So I want to make sure I get any questions that you all have. Before I do that, Donald Pollard, who is my legislative director, has put in the chat, and I'll ask him to repeat for anybody that joined later. Contact information for my office in case we don't get to your question tonight. He handles all the policy. So any questions that you all have, we'll make sure that if we don't get to tonight, he answers. And then casework. A big part of what I do is if you have a problem with any federal agency, whether it's Social Security checks, the post office, we've had a lot of problems with that. My caseworkers here in the Richmond office helped. They are so good that we have now brought $3.1 million back to constituents of money that was tied up with the federal agency. And so please, any federal agency, reach out to us. If you don't live in the 4th district, our ethics rules do not allow me to do any casework for anyone that doesn't live in my district, but we can get you to your congressional member if you contact us through the office. So with that, I'm gonna open it up. Oh, wait, no, there was one, the most important question. I'm sorry. What to expect? I don't know. I don't know. We know that Donald Trump is going to try to implement Project 2025. I think we will be able to stop anything that requires legislation because, again, Republicans have a 2-seat majority in the 119th Congress. They can't govern with a 4-seat majority. I'm pretty sure that Democrats will be able to hold the line on anything Project 2025 related. And we can, hopefully you all heard about that during the election. We're gonna work to stop it. On the Senate side, the filibuster rules make it very difficult for anything to pass. You have to have 60 votes to pass anything through the filibuster. So I think we're really going to be able to stop the worst of the worst through legislation. But the president does have a lot of power through the executive branch. And I think it's going to fall to a lot of our advocacy groups, our allies and our partners, and some members of Congress to use the court system to try to stop the Trump administration from abusing their power. But I got to be honest, we've got a Supreme Court that, is 6-3 that has said that the president has immunity to even break the law within his official capacity. So it's going to be a fight. And the reason I'm hopeful, I am an eternally optimistic person, but I know that the federal government was designed to make it very hard to do dramatic shift that goes against the will of the people. And I am confident that that House and Senate Democrats and all of our partners and allies, including some of the folks you're going to hear from today, are going to do everything we can to hold the line on the issues that we care about, whether it's immigration, whether it's access to health care, whether it's democracy itself. And just stay tuned. If you're not signed up for my newsletter, I do an update every Monday. You can follow me on social media. You can go to my website at mcclellan.house.gov. Sign up for the newsletter. You'll see all my social handles. I'm on X, which is still Twitter to me, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook. At Rep McClellan for everything except Blue Sky. There it's mcclellan.house.gov because that's how they do their handles if you want to be verified. So with that, I'm going to take any questions that we have time for. I want to thank you all very much for giving me the honor to represent you for 2 more years. And I'm here to serve and to partner with Senator Aird to make sure that we take care of your needs, whether legislatively or through casework.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman McClellan. Those were such great updates, and I am extremely happy to hear about your work on the Farm Bill, as well as trying to make sure that our service members have the quality of life that they need and those resources. I do want to ask you, just for those in Facebook land, and good evening for everyone who's watching live stream and everyone on the call tonight. There is a lot of apathy right now as a result of the election outcomes. And some have said to me, well, why should I bother in continuing to advocate? It doesn't feel like it means anything. You have stayed in the fight. You always talk about how important it is to remain active to protect our democracy. Would you mind reiterating some of why that's going to be more important than ever before in this upcoming Congress and as we begin a new presidency under Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I always quote John Lewis, who in his final words to us said, democracy is not a state. It is an action that requires every generation to do its part to build the beloved community. Democracy in and of itself is not the goal. It's what you do with it. But American government and politics and society is a cycle. And so in a lot of ways, we make progress. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. But if you don't keep pushing forward, you lose all the progress that you've made and you can't build on it. And so I fight, a lot. I could be discouraged by the fact that I'm still fighting the same fights that my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents fought. 101 years ago last week, the ERA was introduced, for example. We did our part in Virginia to make Virginia the last state necessary to ratify it, and yet it's still not published in the Constitution. I could be upset about that, or I could keep fighting, because I fight these fights, and we need you to fight these fights so our children don't have to. And we are fighting them from a position of more strength and power than our parents' generation could have ever dreamed of. But you can't give up, because if you do, we're lost. Now, I will say, I see my colleagues every day. The vast majority of them are there for the right reasons. They want to help people. They want to solve problems. Even, we've got very different points of view on the role of government and what we need to do to solve those problems. But at the end of the day, people listen to their constituents. I listen. I get every week, I see what are the top issues that we're getting calls for, and I factor that in into how I vote, and my colleagues do too. And they know that if they ignore the will of the people, they're not going to be reelected. And we had a number of people who weren't reelected because they didn't. So I think it's a government by, of, and for the people. What that means is government is going to reflect the perspective of, and therefore meet the needs of the people who participate. People who disagree with you are participating. Now, part of it is on me as your representative to meet you where you are and give you information where you get it. Not just go on TV, not just put stuff in my newsletter, but be creative in how I get information to you. But part of it is also on you to participate and let me know, hey, here's what I need for you to do. Here's my position on an issue that means a lot to me. And here's what I want you to do. If you do your part, I can do mine. And if I do my part, then, I wake up every day to say, how can I make your lives better? But I need you to help me do it.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman McClellan. Again, you will find her staff's information and her office locations in the chat. And we were just so grateful to have this update from you tonight. I know that you are attending many events on this Saturday evening, so thank you for making time to join us here for this 2025 legislative preview. And again, if there are questions that come later, we will make certain to get those to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and happy holidays, everybody.
Good night. We're going to keep delving into the issues tonight. I'm excited to already see in the Facebook comments, there's a question about, well, what about affordable housing? What about housing? No matter where I go in the district, no matter which part of the district I am in, housing is the number one item that is mentioned to me. Oftentimes from the spectrum of access to housing, access to affordable housing, but even increasingly important, protection of the housing market and the housing stock that we have. So many families are living in conditions that are deplorable because property owners and property managers are not keeping their commitment and making sure that people live in an environment that they can be proud of and can call home. And then furthermore, we need to give more tools to our local governments to hold these individuals accountable. And so tonight, I am thrilled to have a policy expert who's going to talk with us through a spectrum of those housing concerns that have been raised, and that is Christie Marra. Christie is the Director of Housing Advocacy with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. She's been an attorney with the Virginia Poverty Law Center since 2004, and before that worked as a legal aid in Richmond. And as far as Southwest Virginia, Christie's been all over the Commonwealth. Currently, she focuses on the rights of renters and the residents of mobile home parks, which I'm really glad to see there because that's another really key element, particularly in our district, and on efforts to expand home ownership opportunities for previously excluded communities. Christie earned her JD from the University of Richmond and her BA from the University of Virginia. the Virginia State Bar awarded her the Family Law Service Award in 2010 and the Legal Aid Award in 2014. So, Christie, I want to just jump right into this conversation with you. You know the experiences that families are having throughout the Commonwealth, both from having access to being a homeowner, being a individual who have access to a quality rentable property. Talk to us about both some of the progress we've made here in the Commonwealth and what we can look forward to in 2025.
Thank you, Senator Aird. Thank you for having me tonight in this
Yeah.
conversation. And even more, thank you for your leadership on all of these housing issues. Since you first came to the General Assembly, you have really been a champion for residential tenants and first-time home buyers. So I want to thank you for that. And just to talk a little bit about what happened in the 2024 session that made it a number of good improvements for tenants made it through the General Assembly. Not all of them were signed into law, but there were some important pieces of legislation that became law on July 1st of this year. I think the most important had to do with making sure that people who were sued by their landlords for evictions, but were able to pay their rent and not get a judgment against them, don't have that eviction filing hanging over their head forever. And several years ago, the legislature passed a law that gave tenants who had eviction cases that were dismissed, or something called non-suited, which is where the landlord says, you know what, it's already been paid. I don't want to dismiss it for whatever reason. I'm just going to hold off and withdraw it, and then refile it if the rest of the payment isn't made. That's usually done for a partial payment. In those instances, tenants could file a petition with the court to have their records expunged. And what we found was that most people didn't know how to do that, didn't even know that they could do that. So thankfully, this year, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law something that made those expungements of dismissed eviction cases automatic. So beginning July 1, if you have an eviction case filed against you that is dismissed, 30 days after the dismissal, it will disappear from your record. And if it's withdrawn by the landlord through that non-suit, then 6 months after the withdrawal, it will be automatically removed from your record. However, that still leaves tens of thousands of tenants who have dismissed eviction cases on their record because they were filed before July 1st of this year. And we know there's that 30-day waiting period, which has to happen for different legal reasons, during which those dismissed eviction cases are discoverable by landlords and the third-party tenant screening companies. So in the 2025 session, delegates Reeser and Hernandez will be introducing legislation that really makes it clear to housing providers that they cannot deny somebody housing based on an eviction case that was dismissed or non-suited, even if they can still see that record. And so that will help not only the people moving forward for that 30-day period where their dismissed case is still on the books, so to speak, but even more so, it will help all of the thousands of tenants who have older dismissed eviction cases and haven't had an opportunity to get those expunged yet. So that was probably the biggest step forward that we made on housing issues this past year. Another really important one had to do with rental junk fees. We know, and I've seen leases that are 40, 50, 60 pages long, and there's a fee on page 17 and a fee on page 23 and a fee on page 42. And tenants simply don't know that all of these different fees, which can add up to hundreds of dollars a month, are due until the landlord sends them a pay or quit notice saying, hey, you didn't pay these fees, now I'm going to evict you. This past year, there was legislation passed, thanks to Senator Boysko, that now requires housing providers to list all of the mandatory fees on the first page of the lease. And if a fee isn't listed there, they cannot collect it. And that's really important, especially if you talk to tenants who are facing eviction for non-payment. Make sure somebody looks at their lease and at their pay or quit notice, because I bet for this first year or two, housing providers are going to make mistakes. They're not going to list those fees because there's a learning curve. And so if they're not listing them, but they're suing for them, that case can be dismissed, and that tenant can get a little bit more time to get their money together to make the payment. And then the last thing I'll mention from the 2024 session was that there was $5 million included in the final budget to provide deep down payment assistance to first-time home buyers who are whose incomes are below 60% of area median income. And that's really important. And when I say deep down payment assistance, we're looking at a small group of folks that would get this money. And so the average assistance would be approximately $50,000. And that can really go far to make homeownership affordable for somebody who doesn't have access to that money and needs it, as many people do, to make homeownership affordable. So we're really excited. DHCD should be coming out with the guidelines for that program any day now, and we're really excited to see that get off the ground.
Christie, I hate to interrupt you, but I just need you to repeat again, who is it that would be eligible for the possibility of that deep down payment assistance?
Any first-time home buyer that earns less than 60% of the area median income. And I don't have the figures in front of me right now. And you know, Senator Aird, but not everyone knows, and I certainly didn't know until I started working on housing issues, that area median income is different depending on where you live. So that Petersburg area median income is different from Richmond area, maybe different, or is different from Hampton area median income, which is different from Loudoun County area median income. But again, we expect the Department of Housing and Community Development for the state to be coming out with guidelines on this very soon. And hopefully, you know, they will also include for easy access what those income amounts are. But you can also find those on the Virginia Housing website and on the federal HUD website. So moving on to the other pieces of legislation that we will be strongly supporting, that will be introduced in 2025, and that will continue to move things to a better place in Virginia law for tenants and lower income homeowners. First, Senator Aird is introducing in the Senate and Delegate Cousins in the House a bill to provide tighter and stronger and more visible rights for residents of public housing. I know that we have heard a lot in Richmond, and I believe you all have heard some in Petersburg and Hopewell as well, about some real problems with the tracking of rent payments in public housing, so big that there are tenants who are evicted from public housing for being behind in rent when they weren't behind, or when the housing authority knew they were behind, but they really didn't know by how much. And under Virginia law, that's as bad as putting somebody out of their home when they weren't behind at all, because under Virginia law, thanks to a law passed several years ago, as long as a tenant pays everything they owe at least 48 hours before the sheriff comes, that eviction has to be canceled. And so if you don't know how much you really owe because the housing authority hasn't calculated it correctly, you lose your right to pay the proper amount and stop the eviction. So this is really important legislation, and it will do three things. The first thing deals directly with, how do I, as a resident of public housing who just got a cut in pay or just lost my job, make sure that my rent is calculated properly moving forward? And there are specific rules for how the tenant can submit information about the change of income. If you lost your job completely, you have the right to request a hardship exemption and have your rent drop to zero. But again, that information on how to do that comes in your initial stack of papers, and that's a lot of paperwork that most people are not in a position to memorize, right? And so this bill would first and foremost require the Public Housing Authority to give tenants who are getting that pay or quit notice, which is what starts an eviction, clear information about how to request a reduction in their rent and how to request zero rent if they've lost their job. It will also, the legislation will also allow judges to waive the appeal bond for public housing tenants who get a judgment against them for eviction for non-payment of rent. Right now, in order to appeal that to a higher court and get the tenants have to post an appeal bond, which usually makes it impossible for the tenants to appeal. So this legislation would allow a judge to waive that appeal bond for any public housing resident who is indigent, who doesn't earn more than a certain amount of money. Judges can do that in almost every other kind of case for someone who's indigent, except for eviction cases. And so this would be a big step in the right direction. And then finally, this bill would also clarify that landlords can't charge tenants to fix things that the tenant didn't break themselves. So that's that bill. And I am worried that I'm going on a little too much because I have a tendency to do that. So please give me that sign whenever.
You're pretty much there, Christie. So
okay, there you go. There are a lot more, and if anybody has specific questions about a specific issue, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of interest that I'm seeing on our Facebook Live about the information that you have shared, but you have basically given us such great information on that spectrum, right? Not only are there resources in place that are very exciting to ensure that the state is offering support for first-time home buyers to possibly get you in that range of purchasing your first home, but also making sure that if you are a resident and under the housing authority, that you have protections to ensure you can afford where you live and that it's quality living. But then also, even if you are just a residential renter, that you have protections as well to help prevent eviction. And so the one bill that I will raise under the housing category, again, is to support our localities being able to combat absentee landlords, or as I like to call them, slumlords. And so I will also be introducing legislation to increase the fees for code violations. Right now, property owners are simply eating the fines and fees that are being issued when they are renting out subpar properties. But in 2025, we want to give our localities the tools that they need to combat that. So there's a whole range of housing issues that will be considered during the 2025 General Assembly session. But I want to thank Christie for giving us a sneak preview into some of the top priorities and a look back at where we've been. Thank you so much, Christie. Now, I'd like to jump right into a topic that I also know is very popular. After this past election, many families have talked to me about the high cost of groceries, the high cost of childcare, on top of just affording prescriptions and everyday needs that you have in your life. And what I'm always thinking about is how do we get more money in the hands of more families? And I'm talking about like direct cash, not limitations to how you can and should be able to spend that money, especially when you have children in your household, school age or otherwise. And so one of the things that we saw work very successfully was a tax credit during the pandemic, a child tax credit during the pandemic. And the data shows that this was so instrumental that it lifted families out of a state of poverty in some instances. But now, without that resource, we're seeing families revert back to the same level of hardship that they were previously experiencing. So tonight, I've asked another policy expert to join us to talk about the possibility of a child tax credit here in the Commonwealth. And to do so, we will have my dear friend and policy expert, Rodrigo Soto. And Rodrigo is the legislative and campaign director for the Commonwealth Institute. He works with partners across the Commonwealth to make sure that Virginians can make investments that advance justice and break down barriers to opportunity for all by advancing policies that write the state's upside down tax code. And I know you hear tax code and you begin to glaze over, but I promise you that this is going to be an exciting conversation. He previously worked as legislative aide in the Virginia House of Delegates for over 3 years. And Rodrigo currently serves on the Virginia Latino Advisory Board, the Virginia Milk Commission, the Undocumented Mason Advisory Board, and Just Neighbors Board of Directors. Since coming out as both undocumented and gay, he has been committed to fighting for progressive change at all levels of government. So, Rodrigo, talk to us about tax policy, specifically the child tax credit. And please don't make us glaze over. Help us to understand this in an easy way. And just as a reminder, if you do have questions, Facebook Live or otherwise, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Rodrigo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator, for inviting me here today. I am timing myself, so I'm going to make sure that I also help with the time flow today. But just so everyone knows, tax policy can sound scary, but it is also one of the most important sections of Virginia's law and one of the most important issues that lawmakers tackle year after year, because that's what determines the ability to invest in everything else that we care about. Without a good tax code, there is no money for public schools. There is no money for affordable housing. There is no money for the social safety net programs that we care about. And Virginia's tax code is currently really upside down. Right now, a majority of us pay the top income tax bracket. We are in the same top tax bracket as a certain millionaire in Richmond who occupies a certain gubernatorial mansion, which makes you think, why is a teacher and a millionaire in the same top tax bracket? And we start to realize that there's a lot of change that needs to happen in our state tax code. The tax code can help also do a lot of great things outside of like the revenue raising things. It could also cut poverty, and that's what the primary focus of today's conversation is going to be. Back in 2021, during the pandemic, we were able to cut child poverty in half. Across the nation, we lifted half of all kids in this country who are living in poverty out of poverty by improving the federal child tax credit. But unfortunately, Congress was not able to continue that program. And as a result, all that progress we made, we have officially lost. We have doubled the child poverty rate across the nation due to Congress's lack of action to continue the enhanced, the strengthened federal child tax credit. Now, Congress, it can take a really long time to pass bills and pass policies and priorities that we all care about. And that's where states step up. A number of states have gone on to improve or create their own versions of a child tax credit at the state level to make up for what Congress has been unable to do. And that's why we're so thankful that this past year, and this upcoming year, we have an incredible champion in Senator Aird, who is introducing Virginia's state child tax credit, which would create a new refundable tax credit that would be worth $500 per child for households making up to $100,000 per year. And just to like contextualize that, because that's a lot of numbers, if we were to pass Senator Aird's proposal, a family of two who has 2 children could pay up to over 9 months of gas bills, over 3,000 diapers, over a month's worth of groceries, or 331 gallons of gas for the family car. That's real money. That's a real impact in the lives of people who are struggling to get by. And that's Senator Aird's vision for tax policy. But let me give you another vision that Governor Youngkin had proposed this past year. Now, under Governor Youngkin's tax package, he would have given the top 1%, the ultra wealthy in Virginia, an average tax cut of almost $10,000. While raising taxes through a proposed increase in the sales tax rate, he would have raised the average taxes of our lowest income families, the folks who are struggling to get by the most, by an average of $44. So this is what I mean, like, that the tax code is not only one of the most important policy areas that lawmakers consider, but it can be a vehicle for transformative change through things like the child tax credit, or it can double down on an upside down tax code that benefits millionaires and billionaires and shifts the burden, the tax burden more on working class families, particularly low income families who they're just right now, like a low income family is struggling to get by, and under the governor's plan, we would have prioritized giving those big tax handouts to the wealthy. So we're thankful that we have folks like legislative champions like Senator Aird who are fighting for the child tax credit, because that is how we should use the tax code. We should use the tax code in meaningful ways to put money in the pockets of people who need it the most and raise revenues in more progressive ways so that we can invest in the building blocks that we all care about, because we all care and want strong public schools, affordable housing opportunities, and that's one way that we can make changes to the tax code as well. So with that, I am giving myself 3 to 4 minutes for any tax or budget questions. It is a big year, and we'll see a lot of budget questions come up, especially because the governor will be introducing his proposed budget amendments on Wednesday. So happy to answer any of those questions as well.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. I really appreciate you making that super plain, and I really appreciated you breaking down the numbers to what that type of tax credit could equate to. Simply put, one of these proposals, mine, thank you very much, is putting money, real cash into the hands of everyday working families. And there's another that's looking out just for the individuals who, quite frankly, don't need the extra cash in their pockets. I do see one question that has appeared in the chat, and it indicates how can those who are watching live or here in tonight's call help support the proposal to move the child tax credit forward? Is there any organizing that's taking place that they can be part of?
Yeah, for folks that are interested in joining kind of the work that we do, we run a coalition of organizations focused on progressive tax change, which includes raising revenue through a fair share tax, but also providing money back in the pockets of families. So I'm going to put my email so folks can reach out to us. The best way you can show your support is to share your story. Right now, there's a lot of folks who are interested in talking about what the child tax credit meant for them back during the pandemic, who can talk about what it means to what this new tax credit could mean to them now, and talk to folks in the legislature, talk about it in social media. The child tax credit is one of the most popular tax credits and most popular proposals that we heard a lot about this past campaign cycle, and we have polling through TCI that shows that 69% of voters support this state level child tax credit. So we know like the popularity is on our side. Now it's to make sure, now a lot of our work is focused on making sure other lawmakers know too. So Senator Aird's clearly our champion, but like if you have other, there's delegates that Senator Aird overlaps with that have not made their positions clear or have not had the opportunity to vote on this position. So definitely make your voice heard for every lawmaker that you know, so that we can get this across the finish line, including the governor, because the governor represents you, and the governor should hear from you that you support this proposal and this type of tax change versus the type of tax proposals that he's seen in the past. And we'll likely see some sort of upside down tax proposal on Wednesday. TCI is ready to do that analysis work as well.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. Again, he's going to drop his information in the chat if you have questions that come later, but we appreciate him as well making time to talk with us about how we can use resources to give more money back to individuals that need it, particularly working families, individuals with children through a child tax credit. I am going to spend the last 10 minutes, if you will, in a bit of a lightning round to offer some final feedback about the other legislative proposals that you can expect from me in 2025. Here's what's not going to be covered on this list, but will be a hot topic during the next upcoming session. So a few reminders. Number one, the next General Assembly session begins on January the 8th. and it will be the short session. As you know, in Virginia, we alter each year between the short and the long session, and the short session is only for 45 days. And so you heard Rodrigo mention that we will get even more of a glimpse of what will be proposed and covered during that session when the governor announces his projected budget on December the 18th, I believe that is. And so that's on the money side. On the policy side, I try to take some of the top issues that I have also heard about from my 8 localities and put those into bill proposals for 2025. And so I just want to mention a few of those. But before I do, I'm not overlooking your concerns about solar. I hear about solar in every single one of my rural communities and about the desire to want to make sure that localities maintain their power and their decision making regarding where solar should be allowed and or accessible and not. So for all of my constituents that care about that a lot, this will be a very hot topic in 2025, and you have made your position clear to me, and I will continue with my record on that issue of listening to your concerns. Data centers. We just heard a major report just last Monday about data centers. Virginia has more data centers than anywhere else in the world. There are data centers that are being either proposed in every area of my district or already has them in existence. And what we have figured out is we need to find, from an energy standpoint, how we are going to continue to meet the energy burden for having both this type of industry and others in the Commonwealth, while also meeting our clean environment goals. And so that is top of mind for me. You've already heard about housing. You've already heard about opportunities for economic viability for our families. And I'm just going to mention a few more. Number one, from education. If you have been following my work from the House to the Senate, you know that there is not ever a session where I'm not prioritizing education legislation. There's 2 things that I will be doing on that front this session. Number one, extending the opportunity for long-term substitutes to stay in the classroom even longer. We are experiencing both a teacher shortage here in the Commonwealth, but also around the country. Long-term substitutes have been in our classrooms, build relationships with our students. But more importantly, right now in Virginia, we limit that to a very fixed period of time. And when that time period ends, it disrupts the classroom flow and requires another teacher to come in and start over in that same class. We want to prohibit that and limit that as much as possible and allow a teacher who is working towards licensure and has built a relationship with the students in that class to be able to continue on for that academic year. In addition to that, we have seen a change in our accreditation system here in the Commonwealth, what we were referring to as accountability. And we believe that, or I at least believe that, some of the way we have now labeled our schools in categories that are derogatory, we can do that differently. We can add additional transparency to how those schools are being categorized, because in particular, if you label a school as failing or in trouble or in need in any way, any of those words, not only does that affect the community where those schools exist, it affects our students within those. And not only that, but the leaders, the administrators, and the teachers that are providing the service to that school. And we want to make sure that we are taking a holistic approach to how our schools are being categorized and the resources that we provide to them. And the 2024 session, you may have seen that I introduced legislation to propose a rural cabinet secretary. You will see me bring that legislation back because I do believe our rural communities deserve a specific amount of attention that is just really difficult to do when it is siloed and segmented out across the number of cabinet secretaries that exist right now at the state level. Maternal health has been a major issue for me for a number of years. I will be continuing to try and make sure that we are combating the infant and maternal mortality rates here in the Commonwealth of Virginia with legislation around increasing access to doulas, both through budget amendments and legislation, but also more important, something that's called the presumptive eligibility for individuals who are expecting, and there may be one additional bill Protecting our seniors, I have heard a number of stories about individuals who have family members in nursing homes, and the quality of care in those nursing facilities can sometimes be questionable or have been noted and recorded as questionable. I will be introducing legislation that allows the Virginia Department of Health to increase sanctions in real time on those facilities when loved ones are reporting deplorable conditions in those facilities. And so I'm looking forward to working with the Department of Health to strengthen those sanctions. I mentioned to you some of the housing legislation I'm already carrying. As you know, Senate District 13 is home to a significant veteran population. I will be introducing, alongside my colleague, Delegate Brianna Sewell, the Veteran Services Protection Act. This is going to prohibit these third-party companies from charging our veterans astronomical fees for getting access to their benefits, completing their applications to the VA, and framing themselves as providing a resource, but really taking advantage of so many veteran families. And so this Protection Act will help try to combat that as well. Furthermore, we are trying to make sure that we also are being responsible users of new technologies like artificial intelligence. As you know, AI is being used in our schools to make decisions about healthcare access, to make decisions about housing, how much your rent is, who get access to, who can be allowable to rent, and even from decisions like who's employable, scanning your resume and making employment decisions. I believe that our public bodies should be held to a certain standard when utilizing that type of tool for decision making. And so we will have a high risk for public bodies legislation that will be introduced. In addition to that, this session, we are only allowed 20 bills. So I am fixed to that amount, but I'm also going to be carrying an autism bill, making sure that what we have right now, an Autism Advisory Council, is made permanent. A number of families have talked with me about the different barriers they experience in getting resources for their autistic family members and or children. And we want to make sure that the Commonwealth is not only providing the resources that they need, but that it is without barriers and prohibitions. So the list is a little bit longer, but I wanted to touch on some of those and make sure that you had an idea of what I will be working on. I will have another update once I hit the introduce button on all of these, that they're formally introduced, but also there's a whole nother category on the money side, budget amendments that will provide additional resources for the communities that I represent. And that list is a little bit longer. And so we will continue the conversation when we meet again. I'm going to do a quick check now to see if any questions have come through. I know I just included a lot of information and we are almost at the hour mark. So I am going to do a quick check to see if I have any additional questions. There was a question here about how or what about access to Medicaid health insurance for low-income individuals. And ultimately, from my understanding, that is something that is actively available and should be processed through our Department of Social Services. They typically collect a significant amount of your information regarding your income to make a determination as to whether or not you have or can have access to Medicaid, but that is not changing. That should still very much be in place. And just as we heard at the start of the call about resources that our office can provide, if you have interactions with any state agency that ultimately you are having trouble with, my office is fully equipped to be a liaison for you. We're fully prepared to reach out to that agency if you need so. I am seeing a question about conditions in the prison system is getting really bad and dangerous as well for inmates and staff. So in the interim, I actually personally went to visit the jail and have also visited several of our prisons here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There is significant attention being paid right now, particularly to heating and cooling. I have seen legislative proposals about trying to improve those conditions specifically, but then also holding additional accountability in place through possibly an ombudsman. And so that is on the radar of a number of state legislators. And I'll speak specifically to Riverside, which isn't necessarily a prison, that is the jail. But we are hearing with great regularity the access to drugs within our system, as well as mental health resources being needed for those who are engaging with the justice system. And so part of the conversations that we are having is about both how do we provide mental health, increase mental health resources on the outside to prevent someone from engaging with the justice system to begin with, but then also how do we make sure that if in the event you do find yourself justice involved, that you are continuing to get resources when you need it the most. I want to just touch base really quickly on the mental health legislation, which is going to continue to be a major policy priority as well in 2025. I have the privilege of serving on the Deeds Commission. The Behavioral Health Commission is the formal name, shorthand for Deeds Commission. And we have released just a significant package this past week of mental health legislation to make sure that individuals not only are getting access to care quicker, both whether that's an emergency bed, whether that is through your community service board, but then also our localities are receiving enough funding to provide these resources when they are needed also. And so I don't want you to think that we're overlooking that in both directions on the spectrum of the need of care. I'm going to take another look to see if there are other questions, but as a reminder, I can be reached, my team can be reached through a number of methods. Some of you are joining me tonight from social media. You can contact us there. I'm on every platform except I've not made my way to Blue Sky yet, but you can send me messages directly. My email, we will drop that in a chat in just a moment through Senator Aird at senate.virginia.gov. And we really want to continue to engage and connect with you. And so if you didn't ask your question here tonight, I hope that you will ask it to us directly, and we will be happy and thrilled to follow up with you. I'm going to do one last call for questions. I'm here looking in the chat to see if there are any. And again, I really, really appreciate you all joining us tonight. And let's see, there is one final question. What about Red Onion? There has been a lot of tragedy at Red Onion that has been shared publicly. I am a member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus as well, and we have put out a public statement expressing our significant concerns about the conditions that those who are currently housed there have been trying to make aware to the public. So not only are a number of us planning to go personally visit Red Onion, but we are actively in conversations with the Department of Corrections, requesting explanations about what has been shared with us, because we are deeply concerned about what is happening at Red Onion, which right now it feels so far away and so secluded that oftentimes individuals who are housed there feel forgotten, and we want to make sure they know that they are not, and we're looking into the matter. So Red Onion is definitely on our radar. Not seeing any other questions and wanting to respect everyone's time on a Friday night and my commitment to keep this to an hour, I want to again thank Congresswoman McClellan for joining us at the top of the call to give us an update on what we can expect from the 119th, I believe it is, Congress that will begin on January 3rd. But I also want to thank our policy experts, Christie Marra, for talking with us about how to become and get support for being a first-time home buyer, but also the protections we want to have in place for our homeowners, our renters, and individuals that are in vulnerable home situations. And then also Rodrigo Soto for talking with us about how we can put more money in the pockets of working families and parents through the child tax credit. That is all from us tonight. Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to our next conversation. If we don't talk again soon, I bid everyone a very happy holiday. Take care. Thank you.